Hello and welcome back to the Double Radio Gamescast. It's the travel edition. As always, I'm your host Ryan, and I'm joined today by my lovely duo of co-hosts, Brett
Hello.
and Alex.
You're out of reach, but I can still get you.
Ooh. It's episode number 93. We're continuing our character discussion from last week. This time, instead of talking about character creators, we're going to be talking about actual protagonists in games and created protagonists versus existing protagonists. Your games that have, like, think Geralt is an existing protagonist, right? You can't create Geralt. But then you got games like Skyrim where you make your own character. We're going to talk about those. Sound good? Everyone on the same page? Great.
Delicious.
Love the enthusiasm. All right. As a heads up for the next 2 weeks or so, the podcast is going to be slightly different because I am traveling and having to do a travel setup. So episodes will be slightly shorter, not much shorter, but just a little bit to make sure that we have time to get everything in and account for time zones. And audio might get a little weird sometimes. Deal with it.
Oh, well.
I only have one monitor now, so I can't have everything open at once.
Yeah. You've listened to worse. We know you have. We certainly have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
Well, I didn't want to admit it. It's fine.
Hey, this week we have news. It's for the first time in a while the games industry is starting up again after the holidays. I don't know. I think Wyatt was the only one aside from me who actually is excited for Dying Light 2. Right? Am I correct in saying that?
Parkour zombie game, right?
Parkour zombies, yeah.
I was interested in the first one, and I'm still interested in the first one. Probably interested in the second. Most likely not going to get them, though.
Understood,
and I don't know why.
You know, I think that's a good franchise to have that problem with, because they feel like that. Games that are very... I remember them fondly once every 2 years, and then play them for an hour, and then just kind of stop. So, speaking of hourage in Dying Light, apparently the developers have claimed that Dying Light is going to take 500 hours to complete.
Why would you say something like that?
Now, news journalists, Alana Pierce specifically, have confirmed that as of like 2 or 3 weeks ago when they last talked to Techland about the game, the official statement for the campaign length was 20 to 30 hours.
Yeah.
So I want to know where this...
Okay, so that's a campaign length.
I mean, that's a fine campaign length, right? That's pretty similar to Dying Light 1. I'm just wondering, what's the disconnect here, and why does this happen so often? Every time we get like a new game release of a franchise that is even remotely related to RPGs, we get the discussion of, okay, does it have 500 hours of playtime?
And it really, I think most of the time does not need 500 hours of playtime. I think usually, even if it's like what I've said before, where it's like, if the gameplay loop is great, I don't even care. I can just keep doing it over and over again and not care. 500 hours, like, why would you want, like, don't advertise that. You could play any game for 500 hours if you really wanted to, but like, even like the really good ones, like, that are already really long, like other RPGs, if we're staying on RPG specifically, like Xenogears or something, that are like over 100. I don't know if I'd want to play that for 500 hours.
I don't think I would,
love that
generally.
Game. I want to.
I think of, like, I have maybe 5 games that I spent that much time on. League of Legends, because I loved that game in middle school, but like, that's a multiplayer game, right? So you have all the infinite replayability. Probably across all the Halo games, I've gotten to that at some point. The only recent game that I've continued playing after that much is Final Fantasy XIV, which is an MMO.
It's an MMO. Yeah.
So, like, at that point, I don't know. I think there's this weird obsession with hour counts in games, and like, I get the idea that you want value for your money, right?
I mean, past the campaign being the 20 to 30 hour mark, that's money's worth.
But I can only think of, like, everything I've played that has tried to stuff that hour counter with extra things has always been worse off for it.
What comes to mind with me, at least the most recent game that I ran into this with, was Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Yeah, with Assassin's Creed especially.
Yeah, there's so much unnecessary and repetitive things in there.
Just you wait for Valhalla.
Oh god, the map is just spread so far apart. That's travel time is really what brings the hour count up, even with fast travel type things. But
Yeah, I generally think that like pumping these hour counts just leads to a worse game. Uh, it's not very fun, you know. Let people try different games, unless you're really strapped for cash. At which point, I don't think you're going to be wanting to play Dying Light 2 as your one game.
that I mean,
No.
the 500-hour, I guess, is warning sign. Also, signals in my head. Oh, this and this has happened more as I've gotten older. Oh God, I'm aging before my very eyes. I'm turning into dust.
Your nice quarter life
it,
crisis.
I'm not willing to give a video game that kind of time commitment unless
Yeah.
unless something. I don't know. I don't know what the something is. I don't know the exception.
It's got to be something that is engaging the entire time, which is just super
Yeah.
rare. I think in the most case that means you're going to be playing that game for years to come, and like you'll probably drop it, play it in like 30 to 40 hour chunks, and then stop.
I don't
That's
know
what
how
tend
long
to
I've been
happen.
playing The Witcher 3 for.
Speaking of the Witcher 3, that's like isn't that like an actual problem that CPR has said? Like that's our biggest problem with The Witcher 3 is that only like a very small amount of players actually finished it.
Yeah,
Really?
I
They
do
just
think
started.
there's a lot of things that lead to that happening. To where Witcher 3 has like 2 false finishes, where you think the game is about to end, and they're like, "Oh nope, we're going on another thing." Which is great if you're into the game, but it did mean that like there is a lot of build up to that first false finish, and I'm talking like 20 hours of build up to this first false finish, which is really good if you keep going. But if you hit that point, you might just quit,
Yeah.
right? Because you might just be like, "Oh, I don't like this." And it's also the fact that the game has a lot of choices that carry over, and so you hit that problem of if you made a bad choice 2 hours in,
Hours ago.
you're gonna have to pay for it like 50 hours later, and at that point, you're just gonna be like, "Well, if this is gonna ruin my ending, I don't want to do it." Right?
Yeah.
I say that I finished Witcher 3, very good. I haven't finished the DLC yet, probably because of that problem, just not gravitating back towards it. All right,
Hearts of Stone doesn't have it. Blood and Wine might.
yeah, moving back to recent news. Elden Ring. I know we love some Elden Ring talk. We've seen the character creator. It looks good. It has also overtaken Dying Light 2 to become the most wishlisted game on Steam.
Yep.
That's just a neat little bit of info. Everyone wants that Elden Ring.
It's gonna be bonkers, man. I'm not ready.
Oh,
At the same
that
time, I'm so ready.
Elden Ring might be one of the only games I foresee us doing more than one Gamescast on a game that doesn't
Yeah.
get updates.
Yeah, legitimately.
All right, moving on. Hey, awesome games done quick just started today. You can go watch speedruns and earn money to prevent cancer.
You should do that.
Preventing cancer.
Hey, AGDQ, very fun. Every year they speedrun great games. The Legend of Zelda speedruns are always very fun to watch. It's just a very different type of entertainment that I think a lot of people haven't tried, but will likely get a good amount of enjoyment from if they give it a shot. So, heavily recommending that. It should be going, I think, for about a week. Report back if it keeps going after that, because sometimes it gets spread out and the schedule changes. All right. With that, I know you guys had a little piece of news that you wanted to talk about.
Unfortunately,
A juicy
let's make
tidbit.
this quick. Let's make this quick.
Yeah, we'll breeze over it real fast. The thing that kind of made the whole genre of Metroidvania, Castlevania, is having its 35th, I believe, anniversary, and Konami, being Konami, chose that the best way to celebrate it was through NFT versions of the games. I believe their whole like game downloads contained in the NFT, so like Symphony of the Night and stuff, just are
Yeah.
NFTs now.
It's whole games, little video snippets, of character animations and things like that, or like you beating a boss. And then there's also just they're selling the sprites.
AKA things that technically, if you know what you're doing, you can just get for free.
You ever ripped a
You
sprite
also
before? It's
don't.
pretty
It doesn't
fun.
matter. They're NFTs. They do
It really
nothing.
doesn't. There's also
It's just a
something
waste of
really
energy.
awesome. Something really
Yeah.
awesome that people have been doing is the funny meme where Satan says, "I will buy the Castlevania NFT," and then Jesus's speech bubble is just a QR code that you can scan that just downloads Symphony of the Night for you. So obviously, make sure you be careful with which random QR codes you take pictures of from the internet.
Yeah,
But
sometimes there's zip bombs.
I tried it and it worked. So
Hey,
you
Brett,
know.
mind sending me that link?
We're not
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about that on a podcast about video games because that's bad. All
You know,
right.
so I can warn people not to
Yeah,
take
you
pictures
can
of it.
share it to people so they don't use it. So they know to avoid that picture. All right.
Yes.
So that sucks. I feel like Konami is just not going to be able to dig themselves out of this hole they've
You only
created.
get
No.
30th anniversary. It's gone now.
They
You
did
ruined it.
nothing. As they have done for pretty much every anniversary in the past, aside from pachinko machines.
I
So-
wish they did nothing, but they just had.
So we play a game on the show every episode. This time, I got a simple game for you. What is the current best rumored game? I'm asking you what game that is currently rumored is the best game. This has a correct answer.
Rumored, as
Rumored
in,
as-
don't know if it's in
We
development.
have
yet.
not heard a confirmation that it's developed, but it is rumored to be in development.
Hmm.
If you can think things like GTA 6 fits into that. The inevitable. I think Bully 2 did just get deconfirmed, actually.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
lots of games. You can also stretch your mind to think, oh, games that are. I would count Elder Scrolls 6, even though it's technically been announced because we've
That-
seen no gameplay.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, I would count anything we haven't seen any gameplay for in this.
I'm gonna give Ryan the true correct answer.
Brett, you better be right.
And I'm gonna say the pretty much confirmed upcoming Armored Core game from Software.
Yeah, sorry, Alex. Brett just got the question correct, and then
I'm so smart.
look,
I've just been 7-brained over here.
we're the mech boys. We need our mech games. From Software's Armored Core, there has been a bit of sleuthing into that rumor that's been
Yes.
circulating around that maybe not super credible, but at the same time, it's people sleuthing and don't know anything about what they're talking about. The
Yeah.
person who revealed it also doesn't know anything that they're talking about very clearly. So it's
fine.
It's the sort of thing where I'm like, okay, well, I hope even if this isn't real, it maybe gets From Software to know that there's still demand for Armored Core.
Yes, please, God.
I'm just hoping we hit maybe a mech resurgence comes in. We get 10 more mech games all at once. That'd be great.
And then no more for the next 20 years probably.
Once Japan builds their life-size Gundam, it'll be uphill from there.
Oh,
They've
they
already
did
done that 4
twice.
times.
Well, they need to make another one. Come on,
They already
They
did. They
have.
just finished one.
make another one. Keep
Make
going.
one that can walk.
Make
for-
Tokyo 2.
Walk unassisted, I should say, because they did
Yeah,
make one that can walk.
Yeah, but it has a big action base, so.
Yep. All right.
Japan's insane, man.
So we've talked about our Gundams that we want to play with, but now we got to talk about characters. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is benefits of having a created character versus having a pros and cons of having a created character versus having a existing character, right? So what do you get when you make the decision in your boardroom? Okay, we're not gonna have we're gonna have a character creator, or we're not gonna have a character creator. What is the benefit and the drawback of that? So I'm gonna bring up first a weird game, okay? Because I've been in the Dynasty Warriors sphere right now. Been on a plane ride, play some Dynasty Warriors on the plane on my Switch, So I'm thinking about Dynasty Warriors. And I think Dynasty Warriors is one of those types of games where you have the benefit with multiple protagonists and it having 5 different storylines going on at any one time. that you can see from different perspectives. Where like if you made a character and put it into this combat scenario as just like the by person just watching everything happen with nothing happening to them, the game would be dramatically worse because they did that. That was a Dynasty Warriors game at one point. So
What? Can you explain that again? I'm not sure I understood what you're just watching the action.
no, so like it has that problem where you have a created character, but because you create your character right and you create your backstory, you
Oh,
can't have any reference in the game to that character aside from
that they
someone going
Yeah.
like you, right?
they can't be canonical,
Yeah,
I
You
they
don't
guess.
cannot be
influence
the
the
driving
story.
force of the story.
Yeah.
Whereas like when I'm playing Cao Cao in Dynasty Warriors, I'm going like, oh man, it's such a tragedy because I know this man dies, right? He's a historical figure. He does not succeed at what he's doing, but I'm invested, right? Because I'm playing him. I'm seeing his group fighting around, trying to fight this battle they can't win, and it's very fun. And having to not be able to do that with like a created character, I think they've tried it before. It works in games that have like random gen stories, but in like an actual story based game, I think it does have drawbacks, especially if you don't think it through super well.
But that's where with the random thing you were talking about story wise, I guess that's where the Fallout series kind of I don't want to say does it better, does it differently because the character is known as like the
You
courier,
have
the
like a
lone
title.
survivor, the yeah. Um, so I'd say marginally better, but still I definitely get what you're saying with that. There's not I guess as much um emotional connection or as much of an emotional commitment. I think somehow, even though you're the one
It's
who's
because
made the
you kind
character,
of pigeonhole yourself into creating a blank
self
slate,
archer.
right? You have to create the character as a tabula rasa, or else you can't do anything, or the player can't insert themselves as that character. You can kind of go for the middle ground, like Cyberpunk with V, where you have like a character creator, but you are still a character with like a
Yeah.
canonical story that happens. But then you hit the point of like, okay, well, even if I spend all this time in the character creator, it's mostly about aesthetics, right? I'm still playing as V, which is fine. It's just a different experience, right? I'm curious,
Yeah.
Brett. You've played a lot of JRPGs,
I have.
especially recently, and a
I've
lot of
done
older
this.
ones, which I think plays interestingly into this because I don't know if you said you didn't play a lot of JRPGs growing up, right? So
No, I played literally none.
there was the period of time in like the early 2000s when I was a bright-eyed child with my GameCube playing various games and hitting the point of realizing I would get frustrated if a game didn't have an autofilled name for your character, right?
Mm,
When you're
interesting.
playing a Tales game or something, or Legend of Zelda, right? And you know your character's name Link, it, I get happy with that because I'm like, okay, I can insert myself into the role of this character, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm role playing, right? I'm not playing myself in the game. I'm playing a character in the universe. I'm curious what your thoughts on that are.
I think for pretty much like 99% of the time, like the golden amount of character customization and we're like when I say like JRPG, like party based, like uh I don't know, like 3 to 6 people out at a time, and maybe like not like every single like armor or weapon customization shows up on your character. It's in like the main, like some like simpler, more like strategic kind of thing. Because I know when you get into like I don't, like again we talked about it last time, like Dark Souls still kind of counts. That's a different beast than what we're referring
Yeah,
to, I think.
Mm.
because
Um,
it's not a narrative focused game, right? As much as Souls has a deep
The
narrative or a
it's
deep like
yeah,
background narrative happening, it does kind of have that thing where like, you are not the key player until the end,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Whereas in something uh like Final Fantasy 9 or something, where you're the characters, when they get added to your party, they even have like little splash screens of like FMV renders of their character, and then they have like a nice little like their normal name and this wonderful cursive text. And then like right below it is just like pixelated PS1 font. Change the character name, I guess, if you want to. Like that's fine. you can name like you can name Zidane something stupid and just have to deal with that for the whole game because you named him something dumb. And it's like a really touching 40-hour experience that you may have just butchered for yourself because you named him like Butt or something.
It's what always when people do the Pokemon goof names, they name the
Yeah.
character like the start of a sentence.
Yes. Yes. Like that sort of thing. It's just fun, and I think that it doesn't get away. It doesn't take away from you role playing as that character or that character having their own story, um, or that sort of thing. Uh, so I've kind of never really had a problem with it, in this regard of like whether or not it makes them a more successful character or not, whether you get to customize them.
I mean, from my limited JRPG experience, I've pretty much only played Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. I think are the only ones I've
I
played.
mean, it's a good selection. Those
Um,
are two great games.
but it's even with a quote unquote set main character look. I mean, you can change the name probably, like Brett said. But it's from my experience almost exclusively more about the party as a whole than it is
Yeah,
just your character.
especially in Chrono Trigger's case because Chrono doesn't say anything.
Yeah,
He's
you got
he's
a silent protagonist in a JRPG.
Yeah, which that definitely emphasizes more the party than usual, I would think. Which
The
already
group as an
JRPGs,
entity, and not really just a
yeah,
single character.
Did we do a silent protagonist episode of the
Look,
podcast?
that's one of those episodes we have to be careful with.
yeah.
Because for those Wyatt couldn't make it tonight, but he vehemently hates silent protagonists,
Yes.
including Gordon Freeman.
But it's okay because I have notes on that, so I can say the opposite of what he thinks later when we get more
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the
Oh,
fitting place for
that's
that.
wonderful. I had completely forgotten about the Half-Life games.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I do think what I'm kind of getting at with this is when you're playing a game that is narrative focused, there's this kind of feeling if you're playing a created character that you've made in a character creator in a game that like doesn't have a canonical name for you or something, you have this feeling of like I think most of the games end up being about the events that happen rather than your character as like a person. Right? I don't think I would ever play a like Elder Scrolls
Yes.
game and see character growth that I do not create for myself, right?
Yeah, the character growth in that case is you leveling up. It's just the physical leveling
Yeah,
up.
it's abstracted into mechanics and not actually part of the narrative, which I think is fine. But I do think it means that that's a choice you have to make when you're creating the game. Of if you're going to have this kind of growth based narrative, you can't really expect it to work super well if your players are able to create like a diverse array of characters for it and not have it be affected properly. It's like because if I created a male character in their like 50s, the dialogue for that character needs to be different than the dialogue for like a
yeah,
female
yeah.
character in her like 20s or something, right?
Hello, fellow kids.
It's the kind of thing where it feels super weird because I tend to gravitate to like three archetypes when I have a created character, right? I go for you got the gruff old man, right? Your classic too old for this Joel type character. Love that, the great character archetype. Then you got your like classic strong young person of some type where you got the plucky go at it attitude, right? You're not abashed to adventure, but those characters have to interact differently for that kind of background to exist,
Yeah.
which can't really happen in a lot of games. Not that like it's impossible to do, but I think budgetary concerns start to rise at that point of we don't have the money to do this
Just like
much
scope in
dialogue,
general.
which I think is odd because if you look back at like early 2000s, late 90s, you see a lot of CRPGs that did kind of get away with that,
Hmm.
but that was generally at the cost of like those games were super expensive to make, and most of them didn't get sequels. Most of them don't look very good. So I think
And
it's a
like,
trade-off.
yeah.
All right. So with you two, how do you lean on that scale? Do you tend to prefer creating a character or having like when you gravitate to a narrative, do you prefer having a character that you build yourself and get to kind of make up your own backstory for, or do you like going with an existing character? What's your gut go with?
I think as as yeah, what usually is the case, I think I more gravitate towards games that have decided characters that just let me like through gameplay and stuff like role play as them instead of like trying to get through the world as like I would or something and then like scrounging together like all these weird like dials and meters and stuff to try to make
Because it
the
is like
stupidest
it's
looking.
almost work, right?
It's yeah.
It can be fun, but you don't want to do it all the time because creating a character is a
It's yeah.
process.
It's why like I have full respect for you and Wyatt like taking like hours and hours to make your characters because that's totally me. Like when I want to make like a cool character, I will absolutely put that amount of time into it. I've absolutely uh just like sat in like the Halo menus or something, just like oh well, I feel like making my armor look like this today, and I have like 5 games that have armor customization on this, so I got to do all of
Yeah.
them to make sure that they look similar enough. But like most of the time that was definitely more me when I was a kid. I think now most of the time it's just like I'm perfectly
I
fine
want to get to the
absorbing.
game, right?
It's yeah, I want to get to the game. I want to absorb the story, and I don't. I think what's become more important to me now is that especially the games that I'm playing more now is that I don't want to end up tainting the experience for myself. Like I don't want to name Cloud like a bad word or something that's going to keep repeating and like ruin like serious parts of Final Fantasy VII for me. But like, oh, I see the funny word, and now that like it's just funny, the word is there, and Tifa called him something stupid, haha. It's like no, if anything, what I've actually started doing is when I play games that let you rename character and it has like that default name choice. So I'll name it to something that like is a pun on it or like rhymes or is like this just similar enough. Because what I realized is that I played Final Fantasy V, which has actual characters in it, um, and I named them all stupid things and I do not remember any of the characters' actual names because when I played that very long game,
You
I named them
ingrain
all
those names into yourself.
exactly. Exactly. The first time playing through a game, like that's what you remember the characters being called. So I
If
don't
I
know. I
can, oh, sorry, no, you continue.
no, I was about done. Go.
Oh. If if I ever, you can rename Cloud in the original Final Fantasy VII, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to name him Precipitation when I play.
If you can even fit it, which is another
You
Oh,
may
thing.
not be
that
able to. Yeah,
yeah.
I think you have like 7 characters or something.
I I always when I the first and only time I have tried a Nuzlocke, I wanted to name my starter character Schmugglety Wumple. Um,
Nope.
wouldn't fit.
Nope.
Mm. Yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from, and it does remind me of Brett. You've played Star Ocean: The Second Story, right?
Yes.
So I have lucked into finding a way to play that game, and so I started the very start of it just to make sure I was getting things working right. And you get to choose Claude's character name right at the very start,
Yes.
and if you don't do anything, his name is voice acted. If you just leave him as
Huh.
Claude,
Really?
his name's voice acted in the game. So I'm like,
Oh
Nice.
yeah, because it's the PSP port. Yeah.
why do you even get that option
It's exactly.
to just make the game worse?
And especially when you consider the fact that the guy who voices him in the PSP port is Shinji Ikari from
Yeah,
Evangelion, so
the
why would I
voice
want to
acting in
butcher
that
his
in the
lines?
PSP port of Star Ocean 2 is amazing. It's
Yeah.
top quality. Great time. Yeah, but I had that reaction where I went to play this game just to check that my stuff was set up correctly, right? And then I ended up playing it for like an hour because it was a very fun opening.
Yeah, the opening of the game's pretty interesting.
Which I think shows a lot for that game. The combat system is completely incomprehensible without
Don't worry.
tutorial.
They never help you.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting seeing that kind of thing happen in games where it's the same thing that happened in Forza when I was playing Forza, and they suddenly start just saying your name because it's linked to your Xbox account, and it instantly had the opposite effect of what they wanted. It just took me out of everything. It was just like, wait a minute, what is happening?
That second when Doki Doki Literature Club starts reading your files.
No, then I instantly went in and changed the name. It registered for me because I did not want that.
Yeah.
I was getting too close to reality there. Yeah, so I think it's interesting that this is a choice that has to be made. And I think there is like a way to do a middle ground, because I don't think either of you have played Wasteland, any of the Wasteland games, right?
I've never heard of them.
So Wasteland originally is like it's the OG Fallout. I think either the inspiration, one of them inspired the other. I think Wasteland inspired Fallout, and then just Wasteland went dark for 20 years. Did not make a game. Then the second game got remastered, and then the third game came out, and it's like Game Pass, really good Game Pass game. That has, you create like a squad of characters a la XCOM, because the combat is like XCOM style, grid based. And you create your entire squad, and you get to kind of build these party dynamics into your squad, which is really fun. Of like, okay, you can kind of build out a mini personality through character perks and whatnot. Because so much of that game revolves around like having your characters talk to other people, and then you get to have this like a similar experience to the JRPG style of like your group as an entity, to where you go around the world and make so many minor decisions that kind of cascade to your final decisions and whatnot that give you, it feels like you don't have any backstory going in, but by the end of the game you have so much like weight behind every decision you're making that is a kind of thing that you kind of only get with a created character. So
with games like JRPGs, I feel like the one thing that I think that's really good, that with the long run times that JRPGs usually tend to, is you can go in as a character with a blank slate, and you've developed you've developed a backstory for the character in the first half, and then it's okay, now it's on for the actual adventure in the second.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of where the Persona games tend to fall, is encouraging you to kind of build that character out to be something rather than a blank slate by the end. Persona 5 especially is really good at that. So
just don't make them a teacher seducer.
Hey, if that floats your boat, sure. I'm not gonna judge you, but I'm secretly judging you.
I am. I'm gonna judge you.
I will judge you just not to your face. So yeah, I think there is certainly space for that kind of narrative, but it still has the thing of like, you don't have a character creator in those games for the most part. In Persona's case, I kind of get that, because I think it's the art style that mostly stops it. To where you can't really, I imagine making a character that looks good in that art style takes a lot of effort. And it's not a thing of like, you can use a character creator and get something that comes out looking ideal for a 100+ hour game.
You were talking about, building out your character through decisions. I'm going to get a little philosophical on you here. What if the character creator are dialogue choices you make?
That's my favorite type of character creator.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, ooh, I'm in.
System Shock friggin' 2, man. That whole first little bit where you get to like choose what your not like any of your actual cosmetics, because the game is like primordial as far as video games go. But like you going through like military school and choosing the classes that you will take, influencing your stats, is just so like,
yeah, Deus Ex
they
does
didn't
the
have
same
to do
thing.
it, but they did.
It's great.
It's so sick.
Every time I see that in a game, especially in a game that has like a pseudo existing character, you have like Adam Jensen and Deus Ex as your character, at least in the new ones. But you go through and kind of pick early on whether or not you stick to lethal or non-lethal and everything, and you have like dialogue that differs based on those choices. So I think that's my like happy middle ground for the games I tend to gravitate towards, is that kind of character development where it's, all right, you're presented with this kind of character that can go in a couple of different paths. Because I think then you generally have good writing throughout the entire game, right? Because the limitations breed some sensible amount of effort going into every path.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with like Elder Scrolls, you hit the opposite end sometimes.
Yeah. of course, those games being, requiring so much are usually a lot harder to make. But
Oh
I think
yeah.
as a result, like, because of what we're talking about basically is like character building through emergent gameplay, which is very rare to see, where you can actually like influence like the level and like solve it in different ways through like being creative and not just doing what they want you to do, for
Mm.
example. But like it's so rare and so difficult to do that pretty much if your game has it, it's just kind of confirmed to be
It's on
good.
another level, right?
Well,
Yeah.
there's another thing. I think I'm not entirely sure what other. I'm sure at least one other game or game series has done this. Um, but with what we were talking about with the dialogue choices being the character creator, also, your actions changing changing and shaping the game world. The game world essentially being the character that you're creating.
Yeah.
In Dishonored, I've noticed that with their a
Yeah.
little strange at times, but their chaos system. How if you go the lethal route, the levels become a lot harder. There's more enemies for you to kill, so you're gonna have fun going the lethal route. Because more blood.
It's definitely
Um,
designed. The lethal route kind of like gameplay wise encourages you to stick to lethality if you start doing it.
yeah.
Narrative wise, there are consequences, which I think is an
Oh,
interesting
oh yeah.
decision to
I
make.
tried to I tried to do like a non-lethal route in Dishonored 2. I have never finished the game because of glitches, unfortunately. Um, and I accidentally killed like one or two people in the first level. Um, 2/3 of the way through the game, your dead wife or mother shames you. Um,
Whoa.
to an extreme amount if you have even accidentally killed one person. It's
Yeah,
just
that's
you
always.
either there's absolutely no leeway when it comes
I
to that.
do. I liked Dishonored 1 system because Dishonored 1 had more give to it to where you could be like, if you only killed the targets, you were still mostly in the green, right?
Mhm.
Because in Dishonored 1, a lot of the non lethal options are objectively a lot worse than the lethal
Oh,
ones.
they are heinous. There are fates worse than
Yeah.
death
I
all
would.
around every
I
corner.
feel so much worse taking those options than just getting the target done with, right? Um,
Jeez.
but it's very interesting. I think in Dishonored 1 it works out a lot better because that game is a lot more focused on stealth. Then I think the second game started to go crazy with combat options and whatnot, which led to the problem of, okay, now by doing in this like binary system, you have the issue of basically pushing your players towards one route. Because like
Yeah.
the classic saying, players are going to optimize the fun out of your game, 100% true. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Even if they would have more fun doing something different, you cannot rely on the player to know that. So, like, when I play Dishonored, because I know it's going to affect the game, I always play non lethal. I can't bring myself to play lethally, which
Yeah,
means I
it's
have less fun. it, there's a trade off with
I
doing it.
given the option of stealth in yeah, I mean, given the option, at least for me, given the option of stealth in any game, I will absolutely take that option. Even if there isn't an option, I'm going to try to make it and fail miserably. But I'm not a patient person, and I'm not too good at stealth, so I screw up often.
Nice. Yeah, I think it just has. It's that weird system where you need to find a way to toe the line that is not frustrating. And
Mhm.
generally think the way to do that is mostly just by having like dialogue change, but don't actually make certain events locked to a specific path unless it's a very short game. Because if it's a short game
Yeah.
and I can replay it a lot, like Dishonored 1, I
Yeah,
think is more good for that because it is much shorter than 2. Uh, you can replay it pretty quickly if you know what you're doing. I think there's a lot of benefit to the two paths, but in the second game, it's like there's two characters, two paths, and each path of the game is like 15 to 30 hours long, depending on how thorough you are. So it gets exhausting.
yeah,
It's a trade off. And I do think the interesting thing with this is that you kind of in those games you generally can't like create your own character because you have to rely on the story of one singular person with like existing motivation and whatnot. So
yeah.
one of the benefits of not doing character creation in that regard is you can kind of do that kind of story. I think the only game I've seen do it and also have character creation is Dragon's Dogma.
Jeez.
Because Dragon's Dogma has like a pretty in-depth, like not randomly generated, but weird procedural generation bits of the story happen where important characters are decided based on who you interact with and what you do with them.
Ooh, that's interesting.
It's really cool. In practice, it needs some work because almost everyone on their first time playing the game, if they don't know about this system, is going to end up marrying the merchant dude because you just interact with him the most, right? So if you don't do someone's
That's all it takes.
yeah, that's all it takes for him. So it's one of those things where you need to kind of like tune that a little bit to be like, okay, maybe don't have the shopkeeper weigh so highly on his list. But it is really cool if you do like a couple of side quests for some characters, you can get them locked into that position to where you'll have like a bit where the final boss. It's not really a spoiler because this game is 10 years old at this point and not about the story. The final boss will like capture one of the people close to you, and you have to like make some decisions on whether or not you're going to actually rescue them or sacrifice them.
Ooh.
It's a pretty cool, it's a weird system in a game that's not very narrative heavy, but it works very well to give you some actual backstory.
Can you choose to not be close to a person and the boss won't be able to capture someone?
That I don't know. I doubt it. I think that's the scenario where the game is going to choose the merchant for you. At that point, just let him go. He's not that good of a person.
No.
So you can kind of do that. But there's also more of
Uh-oh.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
Oh no, it happened.
Ryan? There's also more to come in this upcoming episode. Oh dear. Uh-oh. Keep talking. Yep.
All right.
On it, boss. Oh, I had something planned and now it has been disrupted. My train of thought
You've
is
been
off the
absolutely
tracks
swoused.
like a crazy train. Oh, what was it? This is really gonna bother me now.
It's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Don't worry about it.
I'm dishonored.
I don't know. It is legitimately very rare to see like that kind of it's a weird kind of character creation because it's both like yeah, you're influencing the character with how you play, but like you're also influencing the entire rest of the like just the whole
Yeah.
game. Which is really it goes beyond character creation, I guess, which I guess we're bending the topic a little bit, but we've never cared about that before. I'm pretty sure sometimes we've set the topic to be something and then we end up talking about something else and then Ryan makes like a different title for
look.
the
It's
video. when he's
vastly
caught on
more fun that
YouTube.
way. So
Oh, I can't
Exactly.
count the
so I
number
can
of times
describe to
I've listened
what
to it.
happened to people listening. The way I'm having to record the audio this time is through a wireless mic.
Oh.
It's like a little transmitter set that I have. One of the transmitters, which battery icon showed it was perfectly fine, just completely lost all its charge.
Oh,
Luckily,
Good.
I have a second one, so we're good to go now. Good recovery, everyone.
oh,
It was a test we passed.
we talked about your two picks. Did we actually touch on what my preference was?
Go
I
for
don't
it.
remember.
Go for it.
I'm glad I get to add a little bit more diversity in this because I mean, while I do love the set protagonist bits, as you know, I'm the guy who will not shut up about the Uncharted series. Um,
I mean, they're good
a lo-
games. So
yeah, I the majority of games I tend to gravitate towards are definitely the it can be open world really, but it also doesn't have to be. But definitely on the side of character creation because I have an incredibly overactive imagination when it comes to that. So I love to do all, if not most, if not all of the role playing in my head and coming up with creating characters, creating different archetypes for them,
I mean, that's the
running
like
multiple
classical
characters.
fun of a role playing game, you know?
Yeah, creating multiple characters at the same time. I think I have 3 going in Skyrim right now.
Of course.
I have a stealth archer, and an arcane trickster.
Hey, the three archetypes, two of which are always stealth archer.
Um,
I definitely
I
get that perspective because it comes with a lot of gameplay benefits. You're no longer locked into a single story,
Mm-hmm.
so you
Yeah.
have that power to do emergent storytelling.
yeah, I think two of those characters that I've done, I haven't even started the main quest. I've done literally everything else in the game except for that. I'm just like, you know what? No, I'm not going to use shouts on this one. On this character, I have exploited it to the point where I am doing a shout only run, which is fun.
Nice.
um, yeah, it's very helpful for an overactive imagination. It's a good outlet. I'd say the character creation type games are.
Yeah, I also think it definitely has a different type of satisfaction where using that kind of character and having that ability to create a character gives you a very unique experience that you just don't get
Mm-hmm.
in games that do have you with it play an existing character.
Yeah,
And like
it
Cyberpunk
it
especially
adds
doesn't even succeed at that. So
it adds another layer of replayability.
yeah,
Because there are different paths that you can choose for a set character in a game, but then there are different archetypes for skill trees and things like that. But you can just have your entire own headcanon for for games like Skyrim and Fallout and things like that.
yeah, and I
For
also think
what you make of it.
it works very well in games like I don't know if either of you have played Kenshi or Mountain Blade or anything like that, but the games that just
Mountain
don't
Blade, yeah,
have it generally don't have a set storyline and just kind of encourage
yeah,
you to exist in the
Yeah.
sandbox. You don't really get that if you have a character with like a canonical story, unless you maybe go for having multiple characters, which I think is like the Saga games do that. Octopath Traveler tries to do it. You have that. You go for the multiple characters, so you can kind of have like a version of that, but each of them is supposedly like better written than a created character would be.
yeah.
And I think what we're getting from this conversation, Alex, is you need to play Dragon's Dogma if you haven't.
I
I
guess
guess
so. It
so.
sounds like I
Yeah.
do.
Is definitely up your alley. Yeah, I think you have a very different set of benefits. Sometimes I just want to sit down, create a character, and then go watch them burn the world down.
Hey, you just remember to quick save before you kill everyone in Whiterun.
Or don't. Or don't quick save and just deal with the consequences.
Mm.
It was recently that I first learned Skyrim. If you get your bounty too high, there is no way to get rid of it.
Oh, what?
Because the only way to get rid of your bounty in certain areas is if you have done the Thieves Guild questline to a point where you can get a presence in that city. And if you haven't done that beforehand, doing the quest in that city is almost impossible.
It puts you on the kill on site list.
Yep. And the only way to fix it is with the Thieves Guild bounty thing, which I don't know if it works guaranteed every time. So
I I think I do save scum a lot more in games with set characters where there's branching storylines and things because I'm
you don't want to mess
less
up.
willing to deal with the consequences of my actions if I'm playing as someone else and not a perverted version of myself.
Well, because I'm of the opinion that I think a lot of video game players tend to equate a good outcome with the best story, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the case. I think if you open yourself up to the idea that maybe a like bad ending or a bad story happens, it'll be more interesting. But I also think when you do that in a game like something like Skyrim, if you had a fail state
Yeah.
to the main
I, there
quest, that would be
there
intense.
there are a bunch of really cool quote unquote bad endings for things. Like if you're really into the lore of Dark Souls, I enjoy the quote
Oh
unquote
yeah,
bad ending for that one.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's I also most of the time, the world is a dark place and I play games for escapism. And I like what's
I think
uh,
what happens when you play like that is you run into this thing where if a game has a better option and you didn't get that better option if you were trying to get it, it now feels like
yeah,
you've personally failed, which is a bad
yeah.
feeling, right? Like that is
Especially if you
not. what
You're a
you
bit
like.
contrived. Yeah.
So I definitely see where you're coming from with that. And it's an interesting thing to play with, but I do think if more games went for the kind of the Dark Soulsy route of, okay, there's no good options here, right? Like nothing you
Oh, yeah.
do is going to fix the problems.
I was looking up some things because I recently experienced the trying to do the good thing and failed. Of I guess I should say spoiler alert. Um, Trying to not kill Solaire of
Yeah, trying to
Oh yeah,
save
every
him.
Dark Souls
like
game
Yeah.
does that.
and the creator doesn't specify it in terms of good or bad. He says the typical ending is that you kill him.
Yeah.
It's because
Good
you
old
kind of
Lucifer.
got
Which I
to
thought
get the
was
story to
interesting.
progress.
I thought it was a really interesting oh my god, what's the word? Specification. The typical and atypical as opposed to, good bad endings.
Yeah, Dark Souls 3
Yeah.
does some really fun stuff with that. Like certain characters will, because every Dark Souls game, if people haven't played them, has like most of the storytelling is in the NPCs around you,
Mhm.
and you can kind of have their quest lines evolve to a point where there's a couple of different outcomes for each one. And sometimes they're really sad, sometimes they're like heartwarming. There's a lot of different
Most of the time they're really
variations.
sad.
Most of the
Onion Man,
time,
his daughter,
they're
Solaire.
bittersweet or sad.
And all the time they're your fault.
Yeah, all the time they're your fault. But there's fun ones where like there's a character in Dark Souls 3 who doesn't like you originally, and then by the end of it is like accepting of the fact that they're gonna die because you did something bad, or maybe good,
Mhm.
depending on your perspective. And well, they're fine with that, and I think it's a very interesting storyline to tell like that. So it's the sort of thing where I just think you need to be willing to have your players feel complex emotions and maybe
Yeah.
not give them all the answers at once, which like playing Project Wingman, not intending to spoil anything, but that game also has like side missions where you can't save everyone, right? You can't do everything perfectly, and it's like, well, oh no, I have to live with the consequences of my actions.
Time for the bad feelings.
Yeah.
But it adds weight. It adds weight because you can then you get the opportunity to do the classic like historical power up scene at the end where you're like, oh, I have to remember the weight of my actions. See, that's what gets me in Dynasty
Exactly.
Warriors, right? So at the end of the campaign, you have your final character going, I remember the weight of our actions, and you have the historical route where they're like, well, it wasn't worth it. I think that's a really funny, not funny, but like interesting way to end it. Where you're just like, well, yeah, it didn't work. We failed.
Anti-cathartic catharsis.
Well, you see, the fun thing that Dynasty Warriors gets to do, at least in 8, which is like the best one, they have hypothetical routes. Because the main game follows the like novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is based on very real events.
Mhm.
So the main route, you followed the characters to the end, right? Their end point, and then you have like a couple of different storylines where you see different perspectives. Because one point in the story, one faction is gone, so you have to play a different faction to see the end of it. But then you have hypothetical routes, which are basically them going through and going, okay, what if at these key moments in history, these crazy plans actually like worked, and like they did unify China or something, right? And you get to see the kind of hypothetical of what these larger than life characters would kind of do in that
Are
situation.
these hypothetical routes? Are they unlocked at the end like B and C
No, so
stories?
they are super
Or
cool. The way you unlock these is you have stars on stages representing like various things that can happen, which are hidden until you beat. You can still trigger them, but they are hidden until you beat the campaign for that faction. Once you beat the
huh.
campaign, they unhide all of them, so you can see like, okay, if in this mission I defeat this character before he manages to like kill this other guy,
Okay.
that saves someone that will then be able to show up in a later stage. So like it's kind of this cascading thing of, okay, you can kind of look through and figure out what happens, but you can also trigger them on your own accidentally if you do them early. I don't think you can actually start the hypothetical route until you finish the historical route once, but you get to see like special cutscenes and whatnot of characters that would die not dying, which is very interesting. It's a neat little way to do that storytelling.
Yeah.
All right, Brett, you've been very quiet this episode.
I don't. I haven't played a Dynasty Warriors game, man. I don't know.
where I'm going with that is we had a second half of this conversation to have.
We did.
We were going to talk about lesser known protagonists, lesser known characters in games, or characters that are in games of not high repute or high knowledge. So we're not talking about your Geralts, we're not talking about your Vs, we're not talking about your Nathan Drakes or your Joels, but everyone else basically is included in this.
By pretty much the standards that we were given, for those of you who don't know, which is all of you, is that pretty much anyone that was not those that we
It's
haven't talked
because
about
we
extensively.
constantly talk about. I think whenever we have this discussion, we root back to Witcher, Uncharted, and Last of Us.
Yeah.
Great games. Let's talk about something else.
Which, if I may begin, if I might
Go
have that
for
honor,
it. Go for it.
is I say that to absolve myself of the sin of saying that the Metal Gear series is an unknown series. But just obviously before everybody gets their pitchforks out, I know I can see you. That oh, you've talked about Metal Gear before. We haven't talked about it specifically enough. And if we're gonna talk about main characters,
We've never talked
and
about any of the snakes.
We
exactly,
haven't, have we? Or Raiden?
or Raiden, yeah. I specifically, because I think he's truly the best one. Ryan, I know will probably obviously back me up. Is Naked Snake, or
Yeah.
it's not a spoiler. They literally say it on the back of the box, Big Boss. Um, this is one of those games that to me makes me always
For
prefer.
those who don't know, Naked Snake is Metal Gear Solid 3's protagonist.
Yes. Um, this is one of those games that really makes me prefer the decided, pre-written, pre-designed, pre-acted, and everything character versus the creative character one, because you cannot have the story that happens in this game with a creative character. It just simply would not work to the degree that it does. Um, and like without going into more so late game spoilers, because even though this game has been out for a very long time at this point,
A lot of
it's
people haven't
still an
played it
important.
because it's
It's yeah, a
also
lot of
a game
people
that is not readily available on modern
not
consoles.
anymore. It used to be, but it hasn't been
Good
for a
old
few months.
Konami.
Yep, that's strike two for them in one episode. That's a record.
That's
Oh,
rough.
Um,
oh no.
um, just the they say in the Snake Eater song that this trial is an ordeal to survive, and it really is, because my god, the amount of times that this man gets thrown off a cliff or like beaten to near death or like shot and probably should have been killed is like
Poisoned.
yeah, poisoned, other things. It's horrible, and they do a very good job of being like, you are not nanomachines. They ain't really. This is the '60s. You're just a guy. You're just an American dude who did the first Halo jump.
You're a dude who's
You're
like
like
pretty tough, but that's it.
yeah, you're tough, and your battle mom was cool, but you're just a guy. And they give you very not like super gruesome detail, but gruesome enough detail where like I just came out of that battle. In any other game, I'll just wait for my health to come back, or I'll just wait for my shield to regen, or I'll use the health pack. No,
Mm.
you gotta go in and look at your X-ray and make sure. Oh, what is that? Is that a bullet in my torso? Well, I gotta pull that out, and then I gotta disinfect the wound, and then I gotta
Oh,
suture it, and then I gotta bandage it up. Or like, oh, is that a broken rib or a broken arm? I gotta make sure I patch it up correctly. And it's super simple. That's not a very challenging system, but I think what that does retroactively for Snake's character in this game, what all the other survival mechanics do, is that it's not like, sure, the survival mechanics aren't difficult, like I just said,
They're not
but he still has
frustrating,
to.
which is the key
They're not
component.
frustrating. They're very gamified, and they're fun enough where you don't feel mad doing them. It just kind of has that thought in the back of your head, like, there's no freaking way I'd be able to do this. This guy is insane. Like, you think about whether you're being like truly stealthy or not. Like there are just certain segments towards the end where you are required to get caught, and the punishment, because it's a Kojima game. There always is one of being more lethal and chaotic, or being more stealthy and putting enemies to sleep, or just going past them. After that point, Kojima just goes, rail shooter,
Oh,
and you're gonna get injured because there's nothing you could do about it. Um, so that there's enough, more than enough canon like injury and survival stuff if you do manage to just go through the majority of the game without having to deal with it, that you could still be like Snake. Oh my god! And again, without
Gotta build
pointing
the
out
legend.
specific, you got to build a legend. Without picking out specific story things. Um, just a blanket statement. The amount of like horrible trauma that this man goes through by the end, after all is said and done and the credits are rolling and you've watched the end cutscene, it's like, wow, I can't even blame him for becoming the bad guy in the first game. I can't, because honestly, it would probably
oh,
make me feel that bad too.
Well, because the key thing too is in the first game, which is on the NES,
Yes.
right? Like this is a game that is older than most modern storytelling, even like predating the classic FF games, right?
Yeah.
It is the kind of thing where that game already has pretty advanced storytelling for its time, and builds to the fact that maybe he's not like a villain. He's just a guy on the other side of this fight, right?
Yeah.
Which is a thing you can't do without establishing these
insane
characters.
Yeah.
for the first stealth pixel game.
Because Brett, I've also been playing some Peace Walker.
Yes.
Man, I love me some Peace Walker because that game has great gameplay. But it reminded me of Metal Gear Solid 5, which I think does a very good. Say whatever you want about the story, but uh, it has a fun little line between like a character creator and having a set character to where
Yes.
you get to do. And I'm not even talking about the fact that there is like a character creator in the game for the multiplayer. You can play missions as any of the captured soldiers you recover and like get from the other missions. So you have like random generated characters that you can play as,
That's pretty cool.
which I think is super fun if you do want to like do a mission in a way that you would not do as your big boss, right? You want to go on a mission guns blazing or something. You can take one of your characters that is not big boss to do that mission and do something interesting, which I think is a very cool
Huh.
system of like you have a degree of separation to where if you want to mix your gameplay style up, you don't have to just play the same character.
Do you not have to worry about growing the horn
I don't
and doing
know because
awful things?
to grow the horn, you have to do a lot of bad things, like to a level of like you can play the entire game lethally and not see the horn unless you make some really bad decisions. So, uh, yeah, there's also a way to get rid of it now if you want to get rid of
Oh,
it. So you do still have to work for it, but you have that like reflection on Snake's character and whatnot. I don't know if doing missions with your operatives incurs that. It might, but either way, I never saw it. Despite going pretty lethal on some missions on my latest playthrough, because there are points where I want to use the cool toys they give you in that game.
Of
Of
course.
I want to ride around on the roller skating mech and and blast some people into oblivion. Uh, yeah, so I think it's very Metal Gear Solid is just a great franchise with how it handles characters for the most part,
Yeah.
especially three. Um,
Especially three.
Three in particular, as well as the first game, I think, are legendary for a reason. All right, so Alex, you got a game you want to talk about? A protagonist you want to talk about, or do you need time to
I
think?
I have kind of three,
Go for it.
kind of three game protagonists. Because the I the the one man's name is in the title, but you do play as a bunch of different people. Um, the Professor Layton series.
We're back,
Of course,
baby.
of course.
I
We've
had to
never talked
find a
about
way.
Professor Layton as a
If
character.
if I am not able to talk about Nathan Drake in Uncharted, I will talk about Professor Layton.
You gotta get the fallback.
Gotta find a way.
Yep. Um, but yeah, he very much described as in the promotional material and through the game as being this unwavering, perfect English gentleman who also happens to have the strangest, both most square and round jaw at the same time. Um, the character design in the Professor Layton games is it's so interesting and
Very
cartoony.
charming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the there was one other the character design things for later. But yeah, the Professor Layton characters. You have all the different people you play as could be at any point. Professor Layton, the apprentice Luke, the kind of apprentice slash often stowaway Flora. That's in the original trilogy. Um, you can play as the assistant Emmy in the new trilogy, and in the second trilogy that got onto the 3DS. Um, and then the newest game, which took an interesting turn back as far as things go, Professor Layton's daughter, which that's I don't know what happened, but everything that the games it's they were talking about the issue where um they sort of built up the challenges and threat levels that Professor Layton was facing, to world ending events in the last game. They're just like, all right, we're gonna dial it back to just small town mystery things with his daughter so that we can build up to things again. Um but it also watered down character design and things like that. Everything seems very plain and boring, and the puzzles got easier and very samey too. Um, right, we were talking about characters.
Yes.
Oh boy. Um, it's very I they're not one note, especially in the original trilogy. Um, but the characters are definitely fitting with their character design. It's very cartoony.
It's like an
Um,
extended version of the classic Sherlock Holmes archetypes and whatnot.
yeah, yeah. Professor Layton is always calm, cool, and collected. He's like, every puzzle has an answer. Now, Luke, listen here. Think it, you know. Um, and then saving Luke when he's in danger. I, I think he's yelled 3 times in all 6 games.
Got to build
Um,
up to those moments.
he's calm to an absurd amount, absurd extent. Um, Luke, the the clumsy, self-proclaimed apprentice, somehow magically just has the ability to talk to animals in a game series where there's not really anything supernatural going on. He just he can just
It's
talk to
it's a
animals.
useful skill. What you can.
Um,
It gives a lot of opportunities for character growth. You got to talk to that squirrel to figure out who did the puzzle.
it
I don't know very
there's
much about Professor Layton.
I think there well, I was talking about the cartooniness of their characters, their caricatures. Really, there's not really character growth, I'd say, in between games. Um, you see Luke get older somewhat, but it's still sort of the same personality, if not a slight bit mellowed out. Um, and there are layers added to characterization with backstory that's slowly revealed for Luke and Professor Layton during things, but it's not really alluded to in any of the other games. Um, he cry. You see him cry for the first and only time at the end of the third game because of spoiler.
So it's
for all
probably more.
non-players.
It sounds like it's more akin to your classic, like not children's, but early to late '90s anime and
Yeah,
whatnot, where
it's
you have the static characters and the more interesting things are the events that they're put into.
there's technically a timeline, but it is very monster of the week type thing.
Yeah, it has that kind of taking each challenge as its own thing feeling.
Yeah. And yeah, I'd say it was with the original two Professor Layton series. They had their cartoony personalities, and they were, they managed to be, maybe not interesting to what people would say, but charming or funny at
Kind
times.
of fitting into that
Um,
like Pokemon appeal of they might be
yeah,
relatively one note characters, but they're appealing to people that haven't played the game before, and especially like fans of lighthearted games.
yeah. And then with the unfortunately with the newest game, the where you play as the daughter, it's every the cartoonish aspect of everyone. And I think this is just trying to get the more kids interested in the series, I guess, so they can play the other ones. Um, but the cartoonish aspects of all the characters are cranked up to 11, and everyone just has these shrill and annoying voice lines. It's unfortunate, at least
They just kind of
for
they
me.
went for an audience that maybe wasn't there
Yeah, yeah.
originally. Um, yeah, I get what you're saying. All right, anything else you want to say about Leighton? Or are you wrapped
Not
up on your?
I'm pretty much wrapped up. I had this character picked a while ago, and I did some research, and I lost the notes that I wanted to say. So I've been stumbling through it. Hopefully, I
Oh,
remembered what I wanted to talk about. But
all right. So around the circles of this podcast, I am known for talking about two games above all others. Yakuza and Final Fantasy are my discussion topics of
Yes,
choice.
the
Now,
trademarks.
Final Fantasy, I can't talk about the characters without spoiling the entire game. And the new
Damn.
expansion just came out. So,
not that you'll be
not going
able
to
to
talk about
play it.
that. Hey, if you're not in right now, you can't buy the game. So, hey, Eorzea is closed. Please get out. I'm going to go play Final Fantasy, and you can't. So, same thing happened with Yakuza recently, because Yakuza 0 through 2 are no longer on Game Pass. So
Yeah.
you gotta go. Hey, if you haven't played Yakuza 0, you're seriously missing out and need to pick that up when it's on sale, because it's $20 normally. It goes on sale for 10 constantly. Amazing games in every way. I want to talk specifically not about the protagonist of the games, but about the side characters and how the growth of the protagonist over the games affects these side characters. Because I think Yakuza is one of the few franchises that has a like 7 game long stretch of having the same protagonist, right? I cannot actively think of many franchises that do that, if any, aside from Yakuza.
And like remain like good and
Yeah,
consistent
and are
over
all like
several times.
well known for good writing, especially because
Yeah.
it leads to a situation that has a level of continuity that is just not present anywhere else. And I want to talk about Haruka. So Haruka is a little girl. You find her in Yakuza 1. She's an orphan. She doesn't have parents. Kiryu, who's the protagonist, ends up taking her under his wing, and she is young. She's like not a toddler, but just above a toddler age, right? She's like 5 or 6, able to talk, but not really take care of herself, right?
Yeah.
So you find this girl in Yakuza 1 and end up taking care of her for the next 7 games, or 6 games at that point, because 0 already happened. Uh, which leads to this incredible amount of character growth between Haruka having to like reconcile the fact that her father figure is at various times a member of the Yakuza,
He
uh,
feels like it.
and gets swept up into not such legal activities, and it leads to like the classic. Not even the classic, but the type of situation where you have to watch this character actually deal with the fact that their father figure is in this weird position, but is also like so trusted that she would never question him or anything, which leads to like that is the catalyst for two of the games. Basically, is Haruka making decisions based on her father and like what she's kind of adapted from that. And it leads to such an interesting progression of things in Yakuza 5 and 6 where you have to deal with like not the life choices that Kiryu made, but the life choices that Kiryu's decisions led to his daughter making.
Ooh.
Which is
My.
you can only do that in a game where you see her like every single game
Yeah.
for like 10 years. Because imagining the timeline of someone playing these games as they released, because they tended to fall in line with when they're released aside from Yakuza 0. Every other game kind of takes place in the year that it was released in. So you literally would have grown up with this character, right?
That's
Ooh, that's a nice
crazy.
touch.
So it is following almost like this is why people watch wrestling, right? It's the real time progression of a character throughout
Yeah.
these games. It's so interesting, and playing through them and seeing this character grow over time, and you learn that like it makes it so much more powerful when you hit those end moments and have the credits roll, and you're like, well, I did this.
Yeah.
This is on me, good or bad, and I think that's such a cool ending. Yakuza 6 is like such a great story-wise game, even if it has other missteps. The story of that game is so interesting and is so unlike anything else that I've played in video games. And I can't talk about it without spoiling major things, so I'm not going to. But there are so many moments in that game that only work. It follows that like Endwalker is the same way for Final Fantasy. They only work because you've been playing these characters for so long and know them so well that you can like call out what's going to happen ahead of time when these characters are involved in a situation, and it's so rewarding to hit that point. And there's nothing else that offers it, right? Like you can't get that feeling anywhere else. So I got to give major credit to Yakuza for that, and especially when Yakuza 4 and 5 have 4 and 5 protagonists respectively.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that a while ago.
Which gets crazy because 1 and 2, to my knowledge, didn't mention the protagonists of 4 and 5 ahead of time when they first released the games. Because if I recall, there was something about like the game was originally planned to be a trilogy or something, so it wasn't going to be like a 7-game long franchise. And then it was super successful, so it got a lot longer. Because they did the re-releases of 1 and 2, these characters now have more story going in where you know them ahead of time now. So when like you hear someone talk about Saejima playing Yakuza Kiwami 1 and 2, you're like, oh, this dude sounds like a badass, right? Like he sounds super cool. I wonder if we're gonna see him later. And then you get to play as him, and you're like, oh my god, it's incredible. And it creates this crazy driving force for a game down the line where like they build up this character called Goro Majima in Yakuza 0, who was never playable in any of the other games, but was a villain. Or not even the villain, but like an antagonist for a while, and then your bud for some stuff. But he's a character that's like off the wall crazy, right? And then Yakuza 0, he shows up in a clean cut suit with a ponytail, and you're like, what?
Oh, you get to see his origin story.
And you get to see his origin story while you're also playing Kiryu's origin story, and it's there's so many like moving parts here that lead to incredibly satisfying conclusions, which is so rare. It's so uncommon to get those kind of conclusions that really hit every note correctly.
Yeah.
And leave you feeling completely satisfied, which I think is so rewarding, and it's why I recommend people play the Yakuza games, because if you play all of those through, you're going to get like an ending in Yakuza 6 that is so out of the space of what other games tend to be able to do, because they just don't stick with characters this long, right? And there's benefits to that. Like having different characters leads to some fun games. You know, classic Assassin's Creed. You had Ezio for 3 games, Altair for another. To see all these different assassins go through their business, but sometimes sticking with that one character has a payoff.
Yeah. It takes a lot of dedication though, but again, if you can do it and not have it turn into I'm like just thinking of other like long running things. I'm just the
It's like
Dragon Ball
Metal
thing that comes
Gear,
to mind.
Dragon Ball. You got your Yakuza,
One
and like
Piece
all of them are renowned, right?
for different things.
For different things, but I think
Yeah.
for at least Metal Gear and Yakuza, you can say that a lot of that is the characters.
Yeah.
And it's a benefit of having that long running continuity that actually has impact on itself. what I think we've just done is talked ourselves into believing that when Final Fantasy tried Nova Crystallis and the crazy FF13 shared universe, it was probably a good idea.
That's the thing. Originally, it probably was a good idea, but the execution.
So poor.
There we go.
I don't
So poor.
know.
Maybe this is what they're doing with 7 now. See, this is why I'm excited for 7 Remake, because if they manage to pull off the Yakuza-style continuity with Final Fantasy 7, that's going to be legendary, right? Like, nothing is going to top that for a long time.
That episodic mobile game that's going to have every game in the 7 franchise ported to mobile devices is going to be the reason that I get a new phone.
Look, I'm just going to wait for... They have to
with
put
their
that on something that's not phones at some point, right?
Oh yeah, because they did the same thing with 15 that they have like a
Yeah, the
like a
Pocket
cheap
Edition.
version, whatever. Yeah. That's
Oh,
on
yeah, they
Xbox.
did do that. They were all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the
Was
Switch.
it the full game, but they were just chibis?
It's the whole game, but they cut out the open world. It's just the story missions. Which
So probably a better game.
actually, I don't know. The open world was the only good part of that game.
No one seems to agree. It's either the open world is great and the normal game sucks, or the open world.
See,
sucks
the open
and
world's
normal game's
great because you get to
fine.
hang out with your buds and make s'mores on a fire, right? Like it's not. I wouldn't say it's a good game, but it's something that's unique. Whereas the rest of the game is just bash our heads into the latest villain that came out of nowhere. So yeah, we're getting off topic here, but I think it's because we've run most of our discussion through.
Pretty much.
And I think we've landed at the answer that I think all of us expected to land at, which is well, there's no one right decision.
No, yeah.
Got to be case by case.
Yeah, this is obviously there are ways to do it right and wrong for sure. I think this is one of those things where like if you mess it up, I think your game will probably suffer a lot for it, and it's I think complex enough of an issue where like people your average Joe might not even like notice like, oh, you gave me too little influence on the world with my pre-designed character, therefore I would have preferred like, no, nobody thinks like that. But it's a thing, like you'll feel it, um but this is also one of the like, because we've come obviously to this conclusion pretty much almost every time before, where there's just not a single right answer and both sides are equally correct.
But there are definitely
Crazy how
wrong
the world
answers.
works out like that.
Yeah, there are wrong answers. Yeah,
There are more wrong answers than there are right answers usually, which is a sad reality.
Mm-hmm.
With that, we've come to shoutouts.
Yes,
We've hit the point in every episode where we end the show. It's sad, but we'll be back next week. Who's got a shout out ready?
I do. A shout out to the fact that I've become a true gamer. I finished my first Shin Megami Tensei game. I am now I've now become a real man.
Now you just gotta hit that persona.
Exactly, yeah. Digital Devil Saga PS2, good game. It was obviously very hard, but it made me want to play more of the series.
They have
also that hard.
They have like a sequel to that game. It's on the 3DS. That's really good. It's like Digital Devil Summoner or something.
You're thinking of Soul Hackers. Don't worry. The names for
Look,
those of you who
they're
don't
very
know,
confusing.
Soul Hackers?
By sequel, I don't
Yes.
mean like actual sequel. I mean sequel in the sense of like Shin Megami 5 is a sequel to Shin Megami 4, even though they're completely unrelated.
Yeah. I only say this because like Digital Devil Saga is one of the only ones that has a sequel. And
It does?
Yes,
didn't know that.
it's Digital Devil Saga and Digital Devil Saga 2 because I finished the game and it
Incredible.
was like, do you want to save your data to put it into the next game where you will get this, this, and this
Ooh.
because of what you did? And then I go, okay.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I hope I didn't screw anything up, but we'll find out.
All right. Look, I got to give my shout out to the wild world of weird indie JRPGs and tactics games
Oh boy.
that I've gotten swept up into because sometimes you just want to take over the world, right? That's why I'm playing
Yes.
Dynasty Warriors, and I've also started playing Brigandine that I talked about. Now I found Fell Seal Arbiter's Mark, which is this like indie Final Fantasy Tactics inspired game. Crazy cool. Weird decisions were made in the art direction of this game. None of them are like super bad, but they're all just it's like the character portraits are like semi-realistic portraits, but then the actual character visuals in the game are like almost chibi things. Not chibi things, but have like goofy heads.
This is the Final Fantasy V Steam port thing where there's 8 art styles at once.
It
Why?
just looks weird because like the portraits look super out of place compared to everything else.
Yeah.
But the game itself is very good. Heavily recommend if you are into tactics games. It is filling that Final Fantasy Tactics shaped void in my soul.
Oh.
All right, Alex, what you got?
Shout out to Dairy Queen Blizzard ice cream cake.
Pretty rad.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes the simple shout outs are the best ones.
Yep.
With that, we have hit the end of our show. As always, Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern Time on the podcast platform of your choice, or YouTube or Twitch. It's on all those. We will see you next week. Live Sunday nights,
Bye-bye.
8 p.m. Eastern.
Thanks for watching with your ears.
For your eyes, maybe you stare at the white screen for a while. Probably not good for your eyes if you do that.
No, yeah.
Play Yakuza.